The plasma bolt screamed past Jack Mercer's head, close enough to singe the gray hair at his temple. He dropped behind a cargo container, heart pounding against ribs that had seen 68 years of wear, and for one absurd moment, thought about how this was definitely not in his job description. Maintenance technicians on Horizon 12 were supposed to fix air filtration systems and patch hull breaches, not dodge weapons fire from space pirates, while protecting a group of terrified alien civilians. 72 hours earlier, Jack had been mopping floors. The corridor on Deck 7 stretched empty at 5 in the morning, fluorescent lights humming their eternal song. Jack pushed his mop in steady strokes, the rhythm as familiar as breathing, watching dirty water swirl into patterns that reminded him of desert sand caught in wind. 15 years he had worked this station, and 15 years the universe had obliged him by being thoroughly, blessedly uneventful. A young officer walked past without glancing down. Jack stepped aside, invisible as always, and continued his work. Old Jack, they called him when they bothered to call him anything at all. The man who fixed things nobody noticed were broken until they stopped working. The ghost of Horizon 12. That suited him fine. His quarters were small, efficient, decorated with exactly 3 personal items. A photograph of Mary taken 6 months before the cancer diagnosis, her smile still bright with the assumption of decades ahead. A medal he never wore tucked in a drawer beneath folded socks. And a letter from his daughter Sarah, handwritten because she knew he preferred ink to pixels, telling him about Tommy's first day of 2nd grade in Houston. Jack traced Mary's face with a finger that had once been steady enough to perform field surgery under mortar fire. 12 years since she passed. 12 years of existing rather than living, of choosing the farthest posting possible because distance made grief easier to carry. Out here, surrounded by stars and strangers, he could pretend the emptiness was just space rather than something carved into his chest. The station woke around him in degrees. Engineers heading to early shifts, scientists nursing coffee, diplomats from a dozen worlds conducting the delicate dance of interstellar relations. Horizon 12 served as neutral ground where Earth and the Valorian Empire conducted their fragile partnership, a marriage of convenience held together by trade agreements and mutual suspicion. Jack had learned to read the Valorians over the years, their jade-green skin that shifted shades with emotion, their ceremonial markings that pulsed with bioluminescence during moments of significance, their rigid hierarchy that made Earth's military look positively anarchic. He found their technology elegant, their culture fascinating, their general attitude toward humans somewhere between cautious respect and thinly veiled condescension. Not that they noticed him enough to condescend. Maintenance staff existed below the threshold of Valorian attention, which suited Jack perfectly. He fixed their malfunctioning door sensors and recalibrated their atmospheric processors and never once expected acknowledgement. Miguel Santos found him in the maintenance bay around noon, carrying sandwiches and complaints in equal measure. 55 years old, former Navy mechanic, hands like leather gloves from decades of honest work. He dropped into a chair across from Jack with the gracelessness of a man whose knees had stopped cooperating years ago. The commissary is serving that gray paste they call protein supplement again. Figured you'd want actual food. Jack accepted the sandwich with a nod of gratitude. Miguel had been his closest friend on the station for 8 years, ever since Jack had spent 3 sleepless nights repairing the life support system in the residential sector where Miguel's family lived. The official engineers had called the malfunction minor. Jack had recognized it as the kind of minor that killed people in their sleep. Chenway arrived next, 62, and perpetually worried about something, followed by Bobby Thompson, who at 58 still moved with the coiled energy of the Chicago firefighter he'd once been. They gathered around the workbench like conspirators, 4 men whom the station's important people would never remember existed. You hear about the Valorian delegation coming in tomorrow? Bobby unwrapped his own sandwich. Full diplomatic escort priority, docking the whole production. Security's been running drills all week. Trade negotiations. Chen's perpetual frown deepened. They want access to our medical technology. We want access to their faster-than-light communications. Same dance, different music. Jack listened without contributing content to let conversation wash over him. These men had become something like brothers over the years, bound by shared invisibility and the quiet satisfaction of keeping a space station running despite the best efforts of its more important inhabitants to break everything. The afternoon brought routine, a malfunctioning temperature regulator in the hydroponics bay, a jammed cargo lift that required physical persuasion and creative profanity, an atmospheric scrubber showing error codes that existed in no manual Jack had ever read, requiring him to improvise a solution from spare parts and intuition. He was elbow deep in the scrubber's guts when the realization struck him. The error pattern matched nothing mechanical. Someone had tampered with the system, introduced code that would cause gradual oxygen depletion over the next 48 hours. Subtle enough to escape automated detection, lethal enough to affect the entire station. Jack fixed it without reporting to anyone except Chief Engineer Morrison, a young woman half his age who took credit for the discovery in her official log. He didn't mind. Credit meant attention, and attention meant questions, and questions meant explaining how a maintenance worker had recognized sabotage that the station's security systems had missed. Some knowledge was better kept quiet. That night, Jack dreamed of Kuwait. The desert stretched endless and burning sand, fine as powder, filling his lungs with each breath. Sergeant Williams lay bleeding in his arms, femoral artery, spurting rhythms that meant death without intervention. Jack's hands moved with desperate precision, applying pressure, improvising a tourniquet from his own belt, screaming for evacuation that wouldn't come for another 3 hours. He saved Williams. The scar on Jack's back, where shrapnel had embedded during the carry to safety, still ached when the weather changed. Even in space, his body remembered. Dawn found him already working replacing filters in a sector that officially didn't require maintenance for another month. The Valorian delegation arrived with appropriate ceremony, their ships docking in the priority berth, while honor guards lined the corridors and diplomats practiced their welcoming expressions. Jack watched from a maintenance access point hidden from view, but positioned to observe. He had learned long ago that the best way to understand any system was to watch it function when no one knew you were looking. The Valorians moved with fluid grace, their robes shifting colors with each step. At their center walked a woman who drew Jack's attention despite his intentions. She wore simple clothing compared to her companions. No obvious markers of rank, but something in her bearing spoke of authority so ingrained it required no advertisement. Her eyes swept the corridor and impossibly found his hiding spot. For one heartbeat, their gazes locked. Jack saw intelligence there, sharp and searching, along with something that might have been loneliness, recognizing its reflection. Then she looked away, and the moment passed, and Jack told himself he had imagined the whole thing. Orders came down for maintenance staff to vacate the VIP sectors during the delegation's stay. Jack found himself reassigned to the cargo holds, the furthest point from anything important, which suited him fine. He preferred the company of shipping containers to diplomats. The cargo section housed a motley collection of Valorian civilians, merchants and servants, and minor functionaries who traveled with the delegation but lacked the status for proper quarters. Jack worked around them, quietly replacing corroded conduit and checking seal integrity until a voice interrupted his concentration. "You work with unusual focus for someone performing such mundane tasks." Jack looked up to find the woman from the corridor, the one whose gaze had pierced his hiding spot. Up close, her features struck him with unexpected force. Green skin, several shades lighter than most Valorian ceremonial markings that traced elegant patterns across her cheekbones, eyes like polished emeralds, holding depths that suggested centuries of accumulated wisdom. "Ma'am." He returned to his work, uncomfortable with scrutiny. "Just doing my job." She didn't leave. Instead, she crouched beside him, examining the conduit with apparent interest. Her companions, Jack noticed, maintained careful distance, watching without approaching. "You have been on this station long." Her Earth standard carried an accent that spoke of careful study rather than natural acquisition. 15 years. Jack kept his hands moving, his eyes on the task. "Picked up a few things about how systems work." "A few things." Her voice carried amusement. "The atmospheric processor you repaired yesterday would have killed everyone aboard within 2 days. The engineers are still arguing about how you diagnosed the problem." Jack's hands stilled. He looked at her directly for the first time since she'd approached. "How do you know about that? I make it my business to know things." She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made his skin prickle. 15 years of learning, you said. What else have you learned, Jack Mercer?" The use of his name startled him. Maintenance workers existed below the threshold of names in most people's minds. He straightened slowly, old knees protesting, and met her gaze. "I've learned that the most important things usually happen where nobody's looking." That power and authority aren't the same thing. That sometimes the person who can fix what's broken matters more than the person giving orders. He paused. And I've learned to recognize when someone's asking questions that go beyond polite conversation. Her smile transformed her face, warmth breaking through regal composure. You are observant. Good. I have a feeling that quality may prove valuable. Before he could respond, alarm shattered the air. Red lights strobed across the cargo hold. Jack's body moved before his mind caught up 34 years of military training, overriding 15 years of civilian complacency. Stay down. He grabbed the woman's arm, pulling her behind a cargo container as the first explosion rocked the station. Hull breach. We need to get to the emergency bulkheads. The cargo hold dissolved into chaos. Valorian civilians screamed and scattered. Smoke poured from a ruptured conduit. Through the haze, Jack saw figures in combat armor pouring through a breach in the outer wall. Weapons raised, moving with professional precision. Pirates. The word felt inadequate for the military-grade equipment, the coordinated tactics, the obvious training. These weren't desperate criminals looking for easy salvage. This was an assault. The woman gripped his arm with surprising strength. There are children in the storage section. We must reach them. Jack assessed the situation in heartbeats. 8 armed hostiles visible, more likely in the corridors. Main exits blocked. Emergency bulkheads sealed to contain the breach. The storage section lay on the far side of the hold through open ground that offered no cover. Follow me. He led her along the wall using cargo containers as shields. Stay low. Don't run. Running draws attention. His mind raced through options as they moved. The maintenance tunnels connected to the storage section, but the access point lay 20 meters away across open floor. The hostiles were herding civilians toward the center of the hold, presumably for sorting. Merchants for ransom, workers for disposal. Standard pirate protocol. Except nothing about this attack fits standard protocol. They reached the tunnel access without incident. Jack keyed the panel, praying the emergency lockdown hadn't sealed it, and felt profound relief when the hatch slid open. The woman followed him into the cramped darkness, and behind them the hatch closed on screaming. The tunnel stretched ahead, lit by emergency strips that cast everything in blood-red shadows. Jack moved by memory, counting junctions, mapping their position relative to the storage section. Behind him, the woman kept pace without complaint, her breathing controlled despite the situation. You know these passages well. Her voice carried no accusation, only observation. I've been fixing things in the dark for 50 years, counting my time in the army. You learn to see without light. He paused at a junction, listening. The storage section is ahead. We can reach the children, get them to the secondary evacuation point. Why are you helping me? The question stopped him. He turned to face her in the dim glow, seeing genuine confusion in her expression. You're a person who needs help. That's enough. Something shifted in her face, walls crumbling behind her eyes. In my experience, help always comes with expectations. Jack thought about Kuwait, about Williams bleeding in his arms, about the dozen other moments when he'd acted without calculating advantage. Maybe where you come from, but I'm just an old man who fixes things, including apparently bad situations involving people I don't know. They reached the storage section to find 7 Valorian civilians huddled in terror, including 2 children no older than Tommy. A young merchant had positioned himself between the group and the door, holding a pipe wrench, with the desperate courage of someone who knew they were outmatched. Jack assessed the space. Reinforced walls, single entrance. Defensible, but only if the attackers didn't use breaching charges. We need to move. There's an evacuation shuttle 2 sections over. If we can reach it before they sweep this area, we have a chance. The woman knelt beside the children, speaking in rapid Valorian that Jack's translator struggled to parse. Whatever she said calmed them, their trembling subsiding as they looked at her with something approaching trust. They will follow. She rose, and Jack noticed blood seeping through her sleeve. A plasma bolt must have grazed her during their escape. She noticed his gaze and shook her head. It is nothing. It wasn't nothing. The wound needed treatment, but treatment required time they didn't have. Jack filed the information away and focused on immediate survival. They moved through the maintenance quarters in single file, Jack leading the young merchant, bringing up the rear with his improvised weapon. The children stayed silent with a discipline that spoke of practiced fear, and Jack wondered what kind of life taught such young ones to hide so well. Explosions echoed through the station's bones. The pirates were expanding their assault, breaching new sections, overwhelming resistance. Jack heard distant weapons fire and hoped his friends had found cover. The evacuation shuttle bay should have been empty. Instead, Jack found three pirates guarding it, their backs to the maintenance access, while they watched the main corridor. Professional positioning, clear sight lines. Disciplined vigilance. He couldn't fight them. He was 68 years old with a bad knee and no weapon. Direct confrontation meant death for everyone he was trying to protect. But professionals watched for professionals. They expected threats to come from obvious angles to announce themselves with weapons and aggression. They didn't expect a maintenance worker. Jack stepped into the bay with his hands visible, his posture deliberately non-threatening. The pirates spun weapons, rising fingers on triggers. Don't shoot. He kept his voice calm, old harmless. I'm just a maintenance tech. I was hiding in the tunnels when I heard the explosions. I don't want trouble. The lead pirate face hidden behind a tactical visor gestured with his weapon. On your knees, hands behind your head. Jack complied slowly, every movement telegraphed, playing the role of frightened civilian with an authenticity born of genuine fear. Not for himself, for the woman and children waiting in the tunnel. Anyone else in those passages, just me. Jack let his voice tremble. I was doing maintenance when everything went wrong. Please, I'm not armed. I'm not anyone important. I just want to survive. The pirates exchanged glances. One approached to search him, patting down his coveralls with rough efficiency. He found the utility knife in Jack's pocket and tossed it aside with a snort of contempt. Old man with a pocket knife. Dangerous stuff. They laughed. Jack waited. The explosion came from the far corridor, distant but loud enough to draw attention. All three pirates looked toward the sound and Jack moved. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. The knife retrieved in a motion too fast for conscious thought. The nearest pirate's throat opened before he could turn. The second died with the blade in his eye. The third managed to raise his weapon, but Jack was already inside his guard, redirecting the barrel as it fired, using the pirate's own momentum to drive him into the bulkhead with bone-crushing force. 3 men dead in 4 seconds. Jack stood among the bodies, breathing hard, feeling the tremor in his hands that always came after violence. The woman emerged from the tunnel, the civilians behind her. She stared at the carnage, then at Jack, and he saw her reassessing everything she thought she knew. You are not simply a maintenance worker. I was a combat medic. Gulf War long before you were born. He retrieved his knife, wiped it clean, tried not to think about how easily the old skills had returned. The killing part was never the job, but sometimes you have to go through death to get to healing. Gulf War, she tested the unfamiliar words. Earth's internal conflicts. 34 years ago, I spent most of it patching holes in people, but sometimes the people making the holes needed stopping first. He gestured toward the shuttle. We need to go. More will come when these 3 miss their check-in. They loaded the civilians into the shuttle, Jack running through pre-flight sequences with fingers that knew the controls despite 15 years of disuse. The woman sat beside him, applying pressure to her wound with a cloth torn from her sleeve. You should let me look at that. After we are safe. The shuttle launched into chaos. Pirate vessels swarmed the station's exterior, exchanging fire with security craft. Jack flew with the reckless precision of someone who'd survived worse odds, weaving through debris fields and weapons fire, making for the emergency rendezvous point on the station's far side. A plasma bolt clipped their starboard wing. Warning lights screamed. Jack compensated, coaxing cooperation from damaged systems, and somehow they made it to the secondary docking bay where station security had established a defensive perimeter. They were safe. For now, Jack helped the civilians disembark, watching them stumble toward the security teams with the dazed relief of survivors. The children clung to adults who weren't their parents, seeking any comfort available. The young merchant with the pipe wrench sat down heavily and began to cry. The woman remained beside Jack, her wound still bleeding, her composure finally cracking at the edges. You saved us. Her voice carried wonder. You killed 3 armed soldiers and flew through a battle to save people you had never met. I told you. Jack felt exhaustion settling into his bones, the adrenaline crash that always followed violence. You were people who needed help. No. She shook her head. You risked your life for strangers. You used skills you clearly abandoned long ago. Why Jack thought about Kuwait, about Williams, about Mary telling him that his purpose was helping people even when it cost him. Because somebody has to. Because if nobody does, then we're all just waiting to die. She reached for his hand, and when their skin touched, the world changed. Light erupted from the point of contact, golden and warm and completely impossible. Jack watched luminescent patterns race up his arm, felt something unlock in his chest that he hadn't known was closed. The woman gasped, staring at her own skin where matching patterns blazed like captured starlight. Around them, every Valorian in the bay dropped to their knees. Jack had no idea what was happening, but the woman's expression told him everything he needed to know. She looked terrified and exalted and deeply fundamentally shocked. No, her whisper carried the weight of centuries. This cannot be. You are human. This should not be possible. What's happening? Jack tried to pull away, but the light only intensified. What is this? She met his eyes, and he saw the walls come down completely, revealing the full depth of whoever she truly was. I am Alindra Serenkai, Queen of the Valorian Empire, and you, Jack Mercer, have just triggered the resonance mark. The universe has chosen you as my destined partner. The light faded slowly, leaving patterns traced on both their skins like luminescent tattoos. Jack stared at his arm, at the impossible evidence of something he didn't understand, and felt the last 15 years of comfortable invisibility crumble into dust. A woman in military armor pushed through the kneeling Valorians, her face pale beneath ceremonial scars. She dropped to one knee before the queen, voice shaking. Your Majesty, we received the emergency signal. The attack your wound, we thought the worst. She looked at Jack with an expression caught between reverence and confusion. The resonance mark. In 500 years there has been nothing. And now with a human Commander Thyra. Alindra's voice steadied royal composure, reasserting itself. This man saved my life. He saved the lives of our people. Whatever questions you have about what just occurred, they can wait until we have secured the station. But Majesty, the implications, the laws, the political consequences. I said they can wait. Steel entered the Queen's tone. Right now we have pirates to deal with and wounded to treat. This man is a healer. Let him heal. Jack found himself ushered to the medical bay where Valorian wounded lay alongside human casualties. His hands moved automatically, assessing injuries, directing treatment, falling into rhythms he'd thought long forgotten. A Valorian child with plasma burns, a human security officer with shrapnel wounds, an elderly merchant struggling to breathe through damaged lungs. He saved them all. One by one, patient by patient, using a combination of field medicine and improvised techniques that had the Valorian doctors watching with frank astonishment. Human medical training applied to alien physiology shouldn't have worked, but Jack had spent 15 years observing Valorian biology, learning their systems through maintenance and curiosity. The Queen watched from across the bay, her wound now properly bandaged, her eyes never leaving him. Jack felt her attention like heat on his skin and tried to focus on the work rather than the impossible thing that had happened between them. By the time the last patient was stabilized, the pirate attack had been repelled. Station security, reinforced by Valorian guards, had driven the surviving attackers back to their ships. The cost had been high: 37 dead, over 100 wounded, damage to 6 sections that would take months to repair. Jack sat heavily on an empty bed, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. His hands shook. His back ached where old shrapnel shifted against his spine. He was 68 years old and had just killed 3 men and saved a dozen more and apparently become cosmically bonded to an alien queen. Mary would have laughed. She always said his life was too interesting for a man who claimed to want peace and quiet. Commander Thyra approached with the careful wariness of someone handling explosive material. Mr. Mercer, Her Majesty requests your presence. There are matters that must be discussed. Jack looked at the resonance patterns, still faintly glowing on his arm. I suppose there are. They led him to a commandeered conference room where Alindra waited with a handful of advisors. The Queen had changed into fresh robes, her wound no longer visible beneath formal layers, her expression composed into the mask of authority. But Jack had seen behind that mask. He knew what waited underneath. Leave us. Alindra's command scattered the advisors like startled birds. Only Commander Thyra remained positioning herself near the door with professional discretion. Jack stood before the Queen of an interstellar empire and felt profoundly, absurdly out of place. You have questions, Alindra's voice softened. I have answers, though I suspect they will only generate more questions. The light, the patterns. What happened between us? The resonance mark is ancient. Alindra touched her own arm where matching patterns glowed. Our oldest texts describe it as cosmic recognition, two souls identified by the universe itself as destined partners. It cannot be forced, it cannot be faked. In 3,000 years of recorded history, it has occurred exactly 6 times and now 7, with a human maintenance worker, with a man who risked everything to save people he didn't know, who killed to protect and healed to preserve, who looked at a queen and saw only a person who needed help. She stepped closer and Jack smelled something like jasmine and starlight. The resonance doesn't mark power or status. It marks the soul. And your soul. Jack Mercer is remarkable. I'm nobody. The protest felt weak even as he spoke it. A janitor with a bad knee and too many years behind him. You are exactly who you are. Alindra's hand found his and the patterns flared bright where they touched. And according to the oldest laws of my people, that makes you potentially the most important person in the Empire. The door burst open. A Valorian male strode in, tall and commanding, his robes marking high status, his expression radiating controlled fury. Behind him came a retinue of guards and officials, filling the room with sudden tension. Niece, the word carried no warmth. I received word of the attack, of your injury, and now I find you alone with a human speaking of ancient laws and cosmic marks. Uncle Vorath. Elindra's composure didn't waver, but Jack saw her spine stiffen. Your concern is noted. As you can see, I am unharmed. Vorath's gaze swept to Jack, assessing and dismissing in a single glance. This is the human who supposedly triggered the resonance, a worker, a cleaner of floors. This is the man who saved my life, who saved the lives of our citizens, who fought through pirates and flew through battle to bring us to safety. A convenient hero. Vorath's smile didn't reach his eyes, appearing at precisely the right moment, triggering a phenomenon that hasn't occurred in 5 centuries. Surely you see how this looks. I see my uncle questioning the will of the universe. Alindra's voice could have frozen plasma. I see him suggesting that the resonance mark, which cannot be falsified, was somehow manufactured. I see him insulting both me and the man who saved me. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Jack watched the exchange with the careful attention of someone recognizing familiar patterns. Power struggle, political maneuvering. A regent who had grown comfortable with authority, facing the threat of losing it. He had seen this before in different uniforms on different worlds. The specifics changed, but the dynamics remained eternal. I suggest nothing. Vorath's retreat was tactical, not genuine. I merely expressed concern. The resonance mark carries legal weight. If validated, it supersedes existing arrangements, including the betrothal to Lord Draken. I am aware of the implications. Alindra's hand tightened on Jack's, which is why, per ancient law, I invoke the right of verification. 30 days of trial to confirm the mark's authenticity. 30 days for this man to prove himself worthy of what the universe has bestowed. Vorath's expression flickered, calculation visible behind his eyes. The trials are demanding. Many have failed who were born to our ways. A human elderly with no knowledge of our customs. Then his failure should be obvious and swift. Alindra smiled without warmth. Unless you believe the trials themselves are insufficient test. Checkmate, Jack recognized. The regent couldn't argue against trials he just cited as proof of difficulty, couldn't claim they were inadequate without undermining his own position. Very well. Vorath's bow held mockery. 30 days. I will watch with great interest. He swept out his retinue following, leaving silence in his wake. Alindra exhaled slowly, royal composure cracking. You should not have agreed to this. Did I have a choice, you could have walked away. The mark would have faded eventually. You could have returned to your invisible life, your quiet work, your peaceful obscurity. Jack thought about the patterns on his arms still faintly glowing, about the moment of connection when something vast and incomprehensible had looked at him and said yes, about Mary's voice in his dreams telling him his purpose was helping people. Your uncle wants you dead. The words came out flat, certain. That attack wasn't random piracy. It was assassination. Alindra went still. What makes you say that? The equipment was military grade. The tactics were professional. They knew exactly where you'd be and when. And the sabotage to the atmospheric system I found yesterday, same signature. Someone's been planning this for a while. You notice the connection. I notice things. It's what I do. He met her eyes. You're in danger, real danger. And now I'm apparently bonded to you by cosmic forces I don't understand. So walking away isn't really an option, is it? She studied him for a long moment, and Jack saw something shift in her expression, something that might have been hope. You are not what I expected, Jack Mercer. I'm exactly what I've always been. Just a man who fixes things. He looked at his glowing arm. Although apparently the universe thinks I can fix bigger problems than broken air filtration systems. The beginning of a smile touched her lips. Then we have 30 days to prove the universe right. Through the window, the stars burned cold and eternal, indifferent to the small dramas of mortal beings. Jack stood beside a queen in a room full of impossible implications and felt for the first time in 15 years like the emptiness in his chest might have found something to fill it. He was in over his head, way over his head, but he had been in over his head before in Kuwait with sand in his lungs and blood on his hands, with Mary watching her slip away while he held on with everything he had, with his own grief drowning in it for years before learning to swim. He had survived all of it. He would survive this too, or die trying. Either way, Jack Mercer was done being invisible. The first trial began at dawn. Jack stood in the center of a ceremonial chamber that had been hastily converted from a diplomatic conference room, surrounded by Valorian officials whose expressions ranged from skeptical to openly hostile. His coveralls had been replaced with formal robes that felt like wearing a straitjacket made of silk, and every eye in the room tracked his movements with the intensity of predators watching wounded prey. Elder Vasric, ancient even by Valorian standards, read from a glowing tablet with the droning cadence of someone who had performed this ritual countless times before. The words washed over Jack in waves of translated syllables, something about sacred bonds and cosmic verification and the weight of tradition stretching back millennia. He understood perhaps one word in three. Miguel had smuggled him breakfast that morning, peering at his quarters with coffee and sandwiches, and the kind of worried expression that friends wore when they thought you were about to do something catastrophically stupid. You know you don't have to do this. Miguel's voice had carried the weight of genuine concern. Whatever happened with that light show, nobody's going to blame you for walking away. She's a queen, Jack. An alien queen. This isn't your fight. Jack had taken the coffee gratefully, feeling its warmth seep into bones that ached from too little sleep and too much stress. Maybe not. But she's in trouble. Real trouble. And I've never been good at walking away from people who need help. There's help and there's suicide. Miguel had shaken his head. You're 68 years old, you've got a bad knee, a worse back, and you haven't held a weapon in 15 years until yesterday. These trials they're talking about, they're designed for Valorian warriors in their prime. Then I guess I'll have to be smarter than strong. Now standing in the ceremonial chamber with hostile eyes boring into him, Jack wondered if smart would be enough. The resonance mark on his arm pulsed faintly, a reminder of cosmic forces that had upended his quiet existence. Alindra sat on a raised platform at the chamber's far end, her expression carefully neutral, but Jack had learned to read the tension in her shoulders. She was worried. For him. The realization settled into his chest with unexpected warmth. Elder Vasric concluded his recitation and fixed Jack with eyes like polished obsidian. The trial of understanding commences. You have 48 hours to demonstrate knowledge of our customs sufficient to participate in formal ceremonies without causing offense. Failure results in immediate disqualification. 48 hours to learn protocols that Valorians spent years mastering. Jack inclined his head in what he hoped was an acceptable gesture of acknowledgement. I understand. The chamber emptied with the efficiency of people eager to watch a disaster unfold from a safe distance. Only Commander Thyra remained, her scarred face unreadable as she approached. You will need a tutor. Her voice carried neither warmth nor hostility, merely professional assessment. I have been assigned to ensure you do not embarrass the Queen more than necessary. I appreciate your confidence. Something flickered in her expression, perhaps the ghost of humor. Come, we have limited time and considerable ground to cover. The next 48 hours blurred into an exhausting parade of gestures, phrases, and protocols that seemed designed to trip up anyone not born to them. Jack learned that the angle of a bow indicated the relative status of the parties involved, precise to within 3 degrees. He learned that color choices in formal wear communicated political allegiances, family histories, and romantic availability. He learned that the wrong placement of a drinking vessel could imply anything from casual insult to declaration of blood feud. He made mistakes, many mistakes. During a practice dinner ceremony, he lifted his glass before the senior official had touched theirs, a breach that would have sparked diplomatic crisis in actual circumstances. During a simulated greeting ritual, he used his left hand where only the right would do, implying doubt about the other party's honesty. During a mock negotiation, he made eye contact at the wrong moment, suggesting challenge rather than respect. Each error earned patient correction from Thyra, and acid commentary from the observers who drifted through to watch his failures. But Jack had learned harder things under worse conditions. In Kuwait, he had absorbed Arabic medical terminology while mortar shells shook the ground. He had memorized surgical procedures by flashlight in foxholes. He had trained his hands to be steady when everything around him burned. Compared to that, memorizing which fork to use for ceremonial fruit seemed almost manageable. The second night, Alindra came to his quarters. She arrived without guards or ceremony, slipping through his door with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to evading observation. Jack looked up from his tablet, where he had been drilling himself on the 17 acceptable responses to a formal introduction, and felt his heart do something complicated at the sight of her. "You should be resting." Her voice carried concern, poorly masked as criticism. "Tomorrow's assessment will be demanding. I'll rest when I'm dead." Old soldier habit, she settled into the chair across from him, her formal robes replaced by simpler garments that made her seem almost approachable, almost human. "You are learning faster than anyone expected. Thyra reports that your progress is remarkable. Thyra reports that I am marginally less incompetent than predicted." There's a difference. The ghost of a smile touched her lips. "She sets high standards." "She should. The stakes are high." Jack set aside his tablet. "Your uncle came to observe today. Watched me fumble through the greeting protocols. He looked pleased. Vorath sees what he wishes to see." Her expression darkened. "He has spent 3 years building power while I struggle to establish my authority. The resonance mark threatens everything he has constructed." "Tell me about him." Alindra was silent for a long moment, weighing words. "My mother ruled for 2 centuries, strong, wise, beloved by our people. When she died, I was young by our standards, unprepared. Vorath stepped into the void claiming regency until I could prove my capability, and the proof keeps getting postponed. There are always new requirements, new tests, new standards I must meet before he will relinquish control." She looked at her hands where the resonance patterns glowed faintly. "I have begun to suspect he never intends to let go." The betrothal to Draken, political alliance supposedly. Draken controls the military forces in the outer territories. Vorath controls the central administration. Together they would hold unassailable power. She met his eyes, with me as a figurehead, a symbol without substance. Jack thought about the attack, about the professional precision of it, about sabotage designed to look like accident. "And if you died before the wedding, Draken inherits your claim through the betrothal contract. Vorath remains regent to a dead queen's memory. You see it clearly. I've seen it before. Different faces, same pattern. Power corrupts. Absolute power makes people stupid enough to think they can get away with murder." He leaned forward. "The question is what we do about it. We survive the trials. We validate the resonance. Once the mark is confirmed, Valorian law protects us both. Vorath cannot move against a cosmically chosen bond without triggering religious crisis. And Drakon is dangerous but not subtle. He relies on force, not intrigue. If the political ground shifts beneath him, he will adapt or fall." Jack nodded slowly. "Then we survive the trials, one at a time." She reached across the space between them, her hand finding his. The resonance flared where they touched, warmth spreading through his chest. "Why are you doing this, Jack Mercer? You could have refused. Could have claimed the mark was error, cosmic malfunction, anything to escape this situation. Instead, you face trials designed to break you opposition, designed to destroy you, dangers you barely understand. Why?" The question deserved an honest answer. Jack thought about Mary, about her voice telling him his purpose was helping people. About Kuwait, about the lives he had saved and the ones he had lost. About 15 years of hiding from grief in the depths of space. Because you need help. Because someone should stand between you and the people trying to hurt you. Because I spent too long being invisible, and maybe the universe decided it was time for me to be seen. He squeezed her hand gently. And because when I look at you, I see someone worth fighting for. Her eyes glistened. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you came to check on a wounded maintenance worker when you could have sent servants. I know you protected children during the attack without thought for your own safety. I know you're fighting for your throne against people who should be supporting you. He smiled. Give me 30 days. I'll learn the rest. She left before dawn, slipping away as quietly as she had arrived. Jack returned to his studies with renewed determination, the warmth of her touch lingering on his skin. The assessment came at noon. Jack stood before a panel of 7 elders performing the rituals he had drilled for 48 hours. His hands trembled slightly. His pronunciation wavered on the difficult consonant clusters. His bows were perhaps 2 degrees off perfect alignment, but he did not fail. Not completely. The panel deliberated for an hour before delivering their verdict. Marginal competence. Sufficient to proceed. Vorath's expression when he heard the news was almost worth the exhaustion. The second trial was physical. Endurance, they called it, though. Torture seemed more accurate. Jack spent 3 days navigating obstacle courses designed for beings with faster reflexes and stronger bodies, running until his lungs burned, climbing until his arms screamed, pushing past limits he had thought immutable. He finished last in every event. But he finished. Miguel and his friends appeared during rest periods, smuggling food and encouragement in the kind of practical support that kept Jack from collapsing entirely. Chen rigged a muscle stimulator that helped with the worst cramps. Bobby provided tactical advice from his firefighter days. Miguel simply sat with him during the dark hours when failure seemed inevitable. "Why are you all doing this?" Jack asked on the third night when exhaustion had stripped away his usual reticence. "Because you do the same for us," Bobby's answer came without hesitation. "Because you have done the same. Every time something breaks on this station, you're there fixing it. Every time someone needs help, you show up. You think we haven't noticed I was just doing my job?" "No," Miguel shook his head. "Your job is maintenance. What you do is care. About the station, about the people on it, about making things work right." He paused. "We've watched you for years, Jack. Watched you help people who never said thank you. Watched you solve problems that weren't your responsibility. Watched you be invisible because it was easier than being seen. And now you're being seen, and we're not about to let you face that alone." The physical trials ended with Jack battered but intact. The elders recorded his times and distances with evident disappointment. He had not excelled, but he had not quit. It was enough, barely. The third week brought revelation. Jack was studying late drilling protocols for the upcoming negotiation simulation when Commander Thyra appeared at his door. Her expression carried something he had not seen before: uncertainty. "I have discovered something." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Something dangerous." She led him through maintenance corridors to a secure terminal deep in the station's infrastructure. The screen displayed communications logs, financial records, tactical assessments. "I have been investigating the attack." Professional curiosity. Thyra's fingers flew across the interface. The pirates were not pirates. They were mercenaries hired through intermediaries paid in untraceable credits. Jack studied the data pieces clicking into place. The payment originated from within the Empire, from within the palace itself. Thyra's jaw tightened. The authorization codes are Vorath's. Proof, actual evidence linking the regent to attempted assassination. It is not enough. Her frustration was palpable. The codes could have been stolen. The intermediaries are dead or vanished. A Valorian court would require direct testimony, physical evidence, something Vorath has been careful to eliminate. Then we need to find something he could not eliminate. Jack's mind raced through possibilities. The sabotage to the atmospheric system. The servant who died, the one they claimed committed suicide. I examined the body. Thyra's voice went flat. The wounds were inconsistent with self-infliction. But I am only a military commander. My testimony carries less weight than a regent's denial. Unless we find proof he cannot deny. Jack looked at the data again. These payments continued after the attack. More mercenaries I do not know. The trail becomes opaque. Then we need to illuminate it. They spent hours tracing financial threads, following money through shell accounts in phantom corporations. The picture that emerged was damning but incomplete. Vorath had been building a shadow army for years, positioning forces throughout the outer territories, preparing for a consolidation of power that went far beyond simple regency. He means to make himself emperor. Thyra's voice carried the weight of terrible realization. The betrothal to Draken is not alliance, it is absorption. Vorath will use Draken's military strength to seize the throne, then dispose of him once power is secured. And Elindra. The question hung unanswered. They both knew what happened to legitimate heirs when usurpers consolidated control. We need to tell her. Jack stood. Tonight. They found the queen in her private chambers reviewing documents with the weary dedication of someone drowning in responsibilities. Her expression sharpened when she saw their faces. The evidence laid out before her painted a picture of betrayal spanning years. Vorath's careful manipulation, the deaths that had cleared his path, the forces gathering in the shadows waiting for the moment to strike. Elindra absorbed it all with the stillness of deep water hiding dangerous currents. I suspected. Her voice emerged steady despite the tremor in her hands. Suspected but could not prove. Could not act on suspicion alone without being called paranoid or power-hungry. We still cannot prove it sufficiently for legal proceedings. Thyra's frustration echoed in every word. A regent cannot be removed on circumstantial evidence. Then we do not proceed legally. Jack felt old certainty settling into his bones. We proceed strategically. Both women looked at him with matching expressions of question. Vorath expects me to fail the trials. He is counting on my disqualification to reset the political board. If I pass, the resonance is validated, his plans crumble, and he will be forced to act directly. You suggest using yourself as bait. Elindra's voice sharpened, provoking him into revealing himself. I suggest making him choose between his careful plans and his desperate ones. When desperate men act, they make mistakes. Mistakes leave evidence. It is dangerous. Thyra's assessment carried professional weight. He has resources, influence armed forces positioned throughout the station. I have survived dangerous before. Jack met Elindra's eyes. And I have something he does not expect. What people who actually care whether I live or die. The fourth week brought Lord Draken. He arrived with an entourage of warriors, his vessel bristling with weapons that technically violated station protocols, his presence radiating threat that made the Valorian guards tense with suppressed hostility. Draken was everything. Jack was not young, powerful, beautiful by Valorian standards, dripping with authority and menace. Their first meeting occurred in the observation lounge, where station officials had arranged an informal reception. Jack stood among the minor dignitaries in his borrowed robes, watching the Lord work the room with practiced charm. When Drekon reached him, the charm evaporated. So you are the human who presumes to claim what is mine. Draken's voice pitched to carry, ensuring an audience for the confrontation. A worker of manual labor, a cleaner of waste and repairer of broken things. Jack felt every eye in the room on him. I am Jack Mercer, and I presume nothing except what the universe has chosen. The universe. Draken's laugh carried contempt, a convenient excuse for ambition beyond your station. I have no ambition beyond survival, and perhaps helping a few people along the way. You will survive only as long as I find you amusing. Draken leaned closer, his whisper meant for Jack alone. The trials are nothing. When they end, regardless of outcome, you will answer to me, and I am not amused easily. He moved on, leaving Jack standing alone in a bubble of hostile silence. The other dignitaries avoided his gaze, unwilling to associate with someone marked for destruction. That night, Elindra came to him again. She had watched the confrontation from across the room, had seen the threat delivered and received, had understood its implications. You should leave, her voice cracked with something that might have been fear. While you still can. The trials are nearly complete. You could claim illness, disability, any excuse to withdraw with honor intact, and abandon you to face them alone. Better alone than responsible for your death. Her hands gripped his with desperate strength. Draken does not make idle threats. He has killed before, will kill again. Considers it sport. Jack thought about Kuwait, about carrying wounded men through fire because leaving them was not an option. about Mary's hand in his during her final hours, both of them knowing the end approached, neither willing to let go. I have lost people I loved because I could not save them. His voice came rough with old grief. I have spent 15 years running from that failure, hiding in the quiet spaces where nothing mattered enough to hurt. He lifted her hands to his lips. I will not lose someone else because I was too afraid to stand. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You foolish, stubborn, impossible man. Probably, he smiled. But I am your foolish, stubborn, impossible man. Apparently the universe insists. She kissed him, then fierce and desperate and tasting of salt. The resonance flared between them, light spiraling through the room, marking them both with patterns that blazed like captured stars. Whatever comes, her forehead pressed against his. We face it together. The final trial arrived 5 days later. Draken invoked the right of challenge, an ancient provision allowing combat between rival claimants. The terms were brutal: 3 days in the Shadow Zone, a hostile wilderness on a nearby Valorian planet, racing to retrieve a sacred artifact. The loser forfeited all claims. The dead, if death occurred, were simply dead. Jack stood before the assembled court, hearing the terms read with growing dread. He was 68 years old. His knee ached constantly. His reflexes had slowed decades ago. Draken was a warrior in his prime, trained from youth in combat and survival, backed by resources and allies that Jack could not hope to match. He should refuse, should cite his age, his limitations, his humanity, as reasons to seek alternative resolution. No one would blame him for avoiding certain death, but refusing meant abandoning Alindra, meant leaving her to Varath's schemes and Draken's cruelty, meant returning to the invisible life he had lived for 15 years, the quiet desperation of existing without purpose. Mary's voice echoed in his memory. I know you, Jack Mercer. You were never built to stand aside while others suffered. I accept the challenge. The words fell into silence. Draken's confident expression flickered with something that might have been surprise. He had expected refusal, had counted on Jack's cowardice to deliver victory without effort. You choose death. Draken recovered quickly. So be it. The transport to the Shadow Zone departed at dawn. Jack spent his final night on the station surrounded by friends. Miguel brought whiskey from a hidden stash. Chen produced technical manuals for the environmental hazards they had researched. Bobby shared survival tactics from his firefighter training. Thyra provided intelligence on Dracon's fighting style and likely strategies. Alindra stayed until the last moment, her hand in his, the resonance pulsing steadily between them. Come back to me. Her command carried the weight of royal decree and desperate plea combined. I intend to. The Shadow Zone was everything the name promised: perpetual twilight beneath a canopy of bioluminescent vegetation, creatures that hunted by sound and scent, terrain that shifted and changed, making navigation treacherous, temperature extremes that tested the limits of human endurance. Jack landed alone, his equipment limited to a survival kit and the knowledge he had accumulated over 68 years of living through circumstances that should have killed him. Draken landed somewhere else, undoubtedly better equipped, certainly better prepared, absolutely certain of victory. The first day taught Jack humility. He moved slowly, carefully, reading the environment the way he had once read the desert. Every sound meant potential danger. Every shadow hid possible death. He found water, secured shelter, established patterns that would keep him alive long enough to think. The second day taught Jack patience. He tracked Draken's progress through disturbed vegetation and distant sounds. The Lord moved fast, confident, burning energy that would cost him later. Jack conserved, calculated, planned. The second night, Draken found him. The attack came without warning, plasma fire tearing through Jack's shelter, forcing him into the open. Draken emerged from the shadows like a nightmare made flesh, his armor gleaming, his weapons ready. Old man, did you think you could hide from me forever? Jack rolled away from another blast, feeling the heat singe his clothing. His survival knife felt pathetic against plasma rifles and military-grade armor. I was not hiding, I was waiting for what your heart to give out, for you to make a mistake. Draken laughed and lunged. Jack sidestepped, using the Lord's momentum against him, applying techniques from training so old the muscles barely remembered. Draken stumbled, recovered, swung again. Jack ducked, retreated, led the pursuit through terrain he had memorized during his careful day of observation. The trap was crude, a pit covered with vegetation dug with his survival knife during the hours Draken had been racing ahead. Not deep enough to kill, but deep enough to break the ankle of someone running at full speed without looking where they stepped. Draken's scream echoed through the forest. Jack approached carefully, knife ready, watching the Lord writhe in the pit's depths. The ankle was shattered bone visible through torn armor. The plasma rifle had fallen beyond reach. Draken was helpless. "Kill me." The Lord's voice carried pain and fury. "Finish it." Jack looked at the man who had threatened him, had planned to murder him, had intended to claim Elindra as property. He thought about how easy it would be, how justified. Then he thought about Kuwait, about the oath he had taken as a medic, about the person he had spent 68 years becoming. No, he climbed into the pit. He set the broken ankle despite Draken's screams. He applied antibiotics and bandages and the expertise that had saved dozens of lives on battlefields and space stations. Why Draken's question came through clenched teeth. "I would have killed you without hesitation." "I know." Jack finished his work and sat back. "But I am not you." He left Draken alive, supplied with water and basic provisions, and continued toward the artifact alone. The third day brought the prize and the truth. Jack found the sacred stone at the zone's center, glowing with the same light as the resonance mark. As his fingers closed around it, knowledge flooded through him, ancient wisdom speaking directly to his mind. The resonance was not random. It chose based on qualities that transcended species or circumstance. Compassion, courage, the willingness to protect others regardless of cost. It had looked at Jack Mercer and found him worthy. He emerged from the shadow zone carrying the artifact covered in mud and exhaustion, feeling older than his years, but more alive than he had felt in decades. Elindra waited at the extraction point, hope and fear warring in her expression. Jack smiled through cracked lips. "I told you I would come back." The artifact confirmed his victory. But more than that, Draken's testimony given from a medical bed, where Valorian surgeons fought to save his shattered leg, confirmed something else entirely. "The human spared me." Draken's voice carried the wonder of someone encountering the incomprehensible. "He could have left me to die, could have killed me himself. Instead, he healed my wounds and continued alone." Why would he do such a thing? Jack, standing nearby, answered for himself. Because mercy is not weakness. Because healing is always better than harming. Because who we are in our worst moments defines us more than who we are in our best. Draken stared at him with eyes that held the beginning of something that might eventually become respect. But the victory was short-lived. That night, alarms shattered the station's peace. Vorath's forces moved simultaneously across multiple sections, seizing control points, securing strategic locations, implementing the coup he had been planning for years. In his quarters, Jack heard the explosions and understood immediately what they meant. The desperate option. Vorath had chosen action over patience, and now everything depended on what happened next. Commander Thyra burst through his door, weapons ready, her expression grim. "The Regent has declared martial law, claims the Queen has been compromised by human influence. His forces control the command center and main communications. Elindra captured, taken to the secure detention level." Thyra's voice cracked. "He will kill her, Jack. Make it look like accident or enemy action. With her dead and the resonance partner discredited, nothing stands between him and the throne." Jack felt cold certainty settle into his bones. The same certainty he had felt in Kuwait when odds turned impossible and survival required accepting that death was likely. "Then we take her back. Against an army, against whatever stands between her and freedom." He gathered what weapons he could find, feeling the weight of choices that had led to this moment. "You said I have people who care whether I live or die. Time to find out how much." The station's maintenance corridors waited in darkness, paths Jack had walked for 15 years, systems he knew better than anyone alive. Vorath controlled the obvious routes, but Jack had never been obvious. The detention level stretched below them like a maze designed by paranoid architects. Jack studied the schematic on Thyra's tablet, memorizing corridors and choke points, while his friends gathered in the maintenance hub that had become their command center. Miguel checked the connections on a jury-rigged communications jammer. Bobby tested the emergency door overrides they had spent the last hour installing. Chen calibrated sensor ghosts that would confuse Vorath's security systems. These were not soldiers, not warriors, not anyone the Regent would consider threats. That was precisely why they might succeed. "We have maybe 30 minutes before Vorath realizes his sensor grid is compromised." Jack kept his voice low, conscious of how sound carried through station infrastructure. Bobby, the fire suppression system in Sector 7, ready to flood on your signal, foam and chaos, just like the old days in Chicago. Chen, the power grid, fluctuations programmed and waiting. Rolling blackouts in the detention wing, 30-second intervals. Enough to disrupt their coordination without triggering emergency protocols. Miguel Communications. Their internal network will turn to static the moment you give the word. But Jack, this only buys time. When the jamming fails, when the power stabilizes, they will come with everything they have. Jack nodded slowly. Then we make sure Alindra is free before that happens. Commander Thyra adjusted her weapon with the practiced ease of someone who had spent centuries preparing for moments exactly like this one. I have identified 17 guards between us and the Queen. Vorath himself remains in the command center coordinating his forces. He believes the detention level is impenetrable. He built his fortress without considering who maintains the walls. Jack turned to face his unlikely army. Let us show him the cost of overlooking the people who keep everything running. They moved through the station's arteries like antibodies fighting infection. Jack led the way, his knowledge of every junction and access point, guiding them past patrols that never thought to watch the maintenance corridors. 15 years of learning this station's secrets now paid dividends in survival. The first guard fell without seeing his attacker. Thyra moved with lethal efficiency, her blade finding the gap in armor that Jack had identified from years of observing Valorian equipment failures. The body slumped silently hidden in a storage alcove before the next patrol passed. 2 more guards at the junction ahead. Jack hand-signaled the information to Thyra, who responded with a tactical gesture he did not recognize, but understood instinctively. She would take the left. He would take the right. His body remembered movements his mind had tried to forget. The knife felt natural in his grip, an extension of will rather than weapon. The guard turned at the last moment, eyes widening with surprise, mouth opening to shout warning that never came. Jack caught the falling body, easing it to the floor with the same care he would use handling delicate equipment. Blood on his hands again. After all these years, still blood. They pressed deeper into the detention level and past security checkpoints that Chen's electronic ghost had rendered blind through doors that Bobby's overrides opened without resistance. The station's own systems had become their ally. 15 years of maintenance and repair transformed into intimate knowledge of every vulnerability. The cell block appeared ahead, guarded by 4 soldiers in full combat armor. These were not ordinary security personnel. These were Vorath's personal guard, elite warriors loyal to the region alone. Thyra assessed the situation with professional grimness. We cannot take them quietly. The moment we engage, alarms will sound. Jack studied the guards, their positions, their equipment, their assumptions. The ceiling above them held atmospheric processors he had serviced dozens of times. The floor beneath them concealed power conduits he had repaired last month. The walls around them contained emergency systems he knew better than the engineers who had designed them. We do not need to fight them at all. His hands found the maintenance panel's fingers dancing across controls that responded to his touch like old friends. The atmospheric processor above the guards activated, flooding the corridor with emergency coolant gas. Not lethal, but incapacitating. The guards collapsed, their armor's environmental seals unable to filter the unexpected chemical assault. Thyra stared at him with something approaching awe. You neutralized 4 elite soldiers with a climate control system. Every system has purposes beyond its design. Sometimes you just need to see them. Jack stepped over the unconscious bodies. Come on, we are running out of time. The cell holding Alindra waited at the corridor's end, its door reinforced with technology designed to contain the most dangerous prisoners in the Empire. Jack examined the lock mechanism, recognizing components he had seen in classified schematics during a routine maintenance upgrade 3 years ago. This will take time. Thyra's frustration bled through her professional composure. Time we do not have. Jack was already working his fingers, finding pathways that the lock's designers had never intended. Maintenance access points, diagnostic interfaces, the small vulnerabilities that existed in every system because someone somewhere had needed to service them. The door opened. Alindra stood in the center of her cell, wrists bound with energy restraints, her robes torn, a bruise darkening her cheek. But her eyes blazed with fury rather than defeat. And when she saw Jack, something cracked in her expression. You came. Her voice carried wonder and accusation combined. You impossible, stubborn, magnificent fool. You actually came. I gave you my word. Jack deactivated the restraints, catching her as exhaustion and relief combined to weaken her knees. Some things matter more than odds. She clung to him with strength that surprised them both, light flickering briefly where their skin touched before fading to gentle warmth. Vorath will not stop. Her words came muffled against his shoulder. He has committed too fully to retreat. This ends only when one side falls completely. Then we make certain it is not our side. They moved back through the corridors, Elindra supported between Jack and Thyra, the maintenance team providing cover and distraction. Chen's power fluctuations created chaos throughout the detention level. Bobby's fire suppression systems flooded strategic intersections with foam that blocked pursuit. Miguel's communication jamming prevented coordination among Vorath's scattered forces. But the jamming could not last forever. The power fluctuations would stabilize. The foam would dissipate. They needed to reach the docking bay before the window closed. The station shuddered around them, systems straining under the competing demands of normal operation and active sabotage. Jack felt the vibrations through his feet, reading the station's distress like a doctor reading vital signs. They had maybe 10 minutes before critical systems began failing in ways that would threaten everyone aboard, guilty and innocent alike. We need to shut down the sabotage. Jack made the decision without hesitation. People will die if we continue pushing the systems this hard. That will give Vorath's forces time to reorganize. Thera's objection carried tactical weight. We cannot fight our way through an entire army. We do not need to fight. Jack thought about the station's layout, the docking bay's position, the ships currently berthed. We need to fly. The primary docking bay held 2 vessels capable of reaching the Valorian homeworld, Vorath's personal transport, and a diplomatic courier that had arrived with the original delegation. Jack had serviced both ships during the past month, knew their systems as intimately as he knew everything else on this station. Vorath's transport was faster. The courier was closer. The docking bay erupted into chaos as they emerged from the maintenance access. Guards spun toward the unexpected intrusion weapons, rising shouts of alarm echoing off metal walls. Jack did not stop, did not hesitate, did not give them time to organize a response. Bobby now, the fire suppression system activated throughout the bay, dense foam erupting from every nozzle filling the space with obscuring white that turned visual targeting useless. Jack guided Elindra through the confusion by touch and memory, counting steps, measuring distance, trusting the knowledge that 15 years had carved into his bones. The courier's hatch loomed ahead. Jack keyed the access code he had memorized during routine maintenance, feeling profound relief when the door slid open. Inside now. They piled into the ship with desperate haste. Thyra took the pilot station, her military training, including emergency flight protocols. Jack sealed the hatch as plasma bolts began burning through the foam, Vorath's guards finally organizing a response. Launch now, we figure out the destination later. The courier leaped from the bay with force that pressed Jack into the nearest seat. Through the viewport, he watched Horizon 12 recede, the station that had been his home for 15 years, shrinking to a point of light among countless stars. They had escaped. But Vorath still held the station, still controlled forces throughout the Empire, still posed a threat that would not diminish simply because they had fled beyond his immediate reach. Where do we go? Thyra's question carried the weight of limited options. The Regent has declared you enemies of the state. Every port in the Empire will be watching for us. Elindra straightened in her seat, royal composure reasserting itself despite exhaustion and injury. Not every port. There are those who remain loyal to my mother, who have watched Vorath's accumulation of power with growing concern. If we can reach them before his propaganda spreads too widely, we may yet find allies willing to stand with us. May is not certainty. Nothing is certainty. Her voice hardened with resolve. But I will not surrender my throne to a murderer and traitor. I will not abandon my people to his ambition. She looked at Jack with eyes that held fire rather than defeat. You showed me something valuable. Impossible odds are simply odds that have not been overcome yet. Jack thought about Kuwait, about surviving situations that should have killed him, about the stubborn refusal to quit that had carried him through 68 years of challenges. Then let us overcome these odds together. The journey to the Loyalist stronghold took 3 days. 3 days of hiding in asteroid fields, in abandoned shipping lanes, dodging patrols that Vorath had dispatched to hunt them. 3 days of planning and preparation of reaching out through secure channels to allies whose loyalty remained uncertain. Jack spent the time learning the political landscape of the Valorian Empire, learning the names and histories of those who might support them, learning the weaknesses in Varath's coalition that might be exploited, and learning Alindra herself in quiet hours when the ship flew silent through the void. She told him about her mother, the great queen whose wisdom had held the empire together through centuries of challenge, about the crushing weight of expectations she had never asked to carry, about the isolation of leadership surrounded by people who wanted things from her rather than people who cared about her. Jack told her about Mary, about the love that had sustained him through war and peace, about the grief that had hollowed him when she died, about Sarah and Tommy, the family he had left behind on Earth, the connections he had maintained despite the distance, about the years of existing without truly living, waiting for something he could not name. They were different in almost every way that mattered: species, age, culture, experience. Yet beneath those differences, Jack recognized something familiar. Two hearts that had armored themselves against hurt, now cautiously testing whether connection might still be possible. On the third day, they reached the Loyalist fleet. 12 warships hung in formation around a station carved from captured asteroid, their weapons powered down but ready, their crews watching the approaching courier with wary attention. These were vessels that had served Alindra's mother, commanded by officers who remembered the old queen's wisdom and questioned the new regent's methods. Lord Chiron met them in the station's command center, a young Valorian noble whose hatred for Vorath was matched only by his devotion to the true royal line. He knelt before Alindra with passionate formality. "Your Majesty, your presence here gives hope to all who have watched the Empire fall into shadow. Tell us what you require and it shall be done. I require truth to reach our people." Alindra helped him rise her manner, commanding without condescension. "The Empire must know what Vorath has done. The assassination attempts, the political murders, the betrayal of everything my mother built. We have evidence." Kieran's expression darkened. "But evidence means nothing if it cannot reach the citizens. Vorath controls communications throughout the core systems. His version of events is the only version most people hear." "Then we change that." Jack stepped forward, drawing surprised looks from the assembled nobles. "You have ships, you have soldiers, but more importantly, you have the truth. We do not need to defeat Vorath's army directly. We need to defeat his story. The human speaks wisdom." Thyra's endorsement carried weight among the military officers present. "I have seen him accomplish remarkable things through unconventional means. His perspective may prove decisive." The planning session stretched through hours of debate and discussion. Jack contributed where he could, his tactical mind, finding angles that the military-focused Valorians had overlooked. The communications network had vulnerabilities. The propaganda machine had gaps. The army's loyalty depended on belief in lies that could be exposed. And there was Draken. The Lord had been transported back to Valorian space before the coup, his shattered leg requiring specialized treatment. But his testimony about Jack's mercy in the Shadow Zone had spread through unofficial channels, creating cognitive dissonance among those who had been told the human was a manipulative threat. He could be an ally. Jack raised the possibility carefully. "He owes me his life, and he has no love for Vorath, especially now that he knows how he was manipulated. Draken is a warrior bred for conquest." Kieran's skepticism was evident. He respects only strength and victory. He respected mercy when he received it. Jack thought about the moment in the pit, the choice he had made, the consequences that were still unfolding. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is refuse to become what our enemies expect. They dispatched a messenger to Draken, carrying Jack's personal request for communication. The waiting that followed stretched nerves already frayed by stress and uncertainty. When the response came, it exceeded all expectations. Draken appeared via secure hologram, his legs still encased in medical equipment, his expression carrying complexity that had not existed before the Shadow Zone. "Jack Mercer," the Lord's voice held none of its former contempt. "I have spent days trying to understand what you did, why you spared me when killing would have been simpler and safer. Because some things matter more than simple." Jack met the holographic eyes without flinching. "Because who we choose to be defines us more than what circumstances force upon us. Vorath used me like a tool. The admission came with visible difficulty, pride warring with truth. He promised alliance, partnership, respect. Instead, he held my sister hostage to ensure my compliance, threatened her life if I did not pursue his agenda against you. Your sister is safe now. My forces secured her before the coup reached my territory. She is beyond his reach, recovering from her ordeal. Draken's expression hardened with cold fury. Which means I am beyond his control, and I have debts to repay to him and to you. The alliance that formed was improbable but potent. Draken's military forces, combined with the Loyalist fleet, created an armada capable of challenging Vorath's control. But more importantly, Draken's public defection shattered the narrative that all right-thinking Valorians supported the regent. They broadcast the truth across every channel they could reach. Evidence of assassination attempts, testimony from witnesses who had hidden in fear, the financial records Thyra had discovered. Draken's own account of manipulation and coercion of his sister held hostage of the threats that had driven his actions. The empire began to fracture along lines of belief. Vorath responded with force, dispatching his fleet to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. The confrontation that followed would determine everything. Jack watched the battle unfold from the command center, feeling the weight of events beyond his control. Ships clashed in the darkness between stars, lives ending in bursts of plasma and decompression. He had helped set these events in motion, but he could not direct their outcome. Elindra stood beside him, her hand finding his warmth spreading through their joined fingers. Whatever happens, she said quietly, you gave me something I never had before. What? The belief that one person's choices can change everything. Her eyes remained fixed on the battle display, the faith that the universe might actually reward courage over calculation. You always had that strength. You just needed someone to remind you it was there. The battle turned when 3 of Vorath's captains defected their ships, breaking formation, to join the Loyalist fleet. The broadcast had worked. The truth had spread. And soldiers who had followed orders based on loyalty to the Empire discovered that the Empire they loved was not the one Vorath had created. The Regent's fleet shattered survivors, scattering into the void, their coordination destroyed by doubt and division. Vorath himself attempted escape, but Thyra's pursuit vessel caught him before he reached safe territory. They brought him back in restraints, the once powerful Regent reduced to prisoner, his schemes collapsed around him. The trial was swift but thorough. Evidence presented, witnesses heard, justice administered according to laws that Vorath had thought himself above. The revelation of his role in the old queen's death poison, administered over months to simulate natural decline, brought gasps of horror from the assembly. Elindra finally had answers about her mother's passing truth that was painful but necessary. Vorath would spend the rest of his existence in isolated confinement, unable to scheme, unable to manipulate, unable to harm anyone ever again. Jack did not attend the sentencing. Instead, he found a quiet observation deck, watching stars through transparent walls, thinking about everything that had led to this moment and everything that lay ahead. He needed to make a call. The communication system connected him to Earth after a delay that felt like years. Sarah's face appeared on the screen, older than he remembered, worry lines that had not existed when he left, deepened by years of separation. Dad, her voice cracked. I saw the news broadcasts. They said you were involved in some kind of alien civil war. They said you might be dead. I am fine, sweetheart. Tired and bruised, but fine. Tommy's face pushed into frame, 8 years old and vibrating with excitement. Grandpa, did you really fight space pirates? Did you really save a queen? Is she pretty? Are you going to marry her? Jack laughed despite everything, the sound rusty from disuse but genuine. One question at a time, buddy. Yes, there were pirates. Yes, I helped some people. And yes, I need to talk to your mom about something important. Sarah's expression sharpened with maternal intuition. What kind of important? Jack took a breath, feeling the weight of the decision he needed to make. The Queen has asked me to stay. Not as a ruler or anything like that, but as a partner. Someone to help build connections between our peoples. It would mean living out here far from Earth, far from you and Tommy. The silence stretched. Tommy looked between his mother and the screen, sensing significance he could not fully understand. Dad. Sarah's voice emerged, carefully controlled. Are you asking my permission? I am asking if you can forgive me for choosing something that takes me even further away. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, the sound wet with tears she was fighting to contain. Dad, you have spent 12 years running from life. hiding in space because being close to anyone hurt too much after Mom died. I have watched you disappear piece by piece, turning into a ghost who calls on holidays and sends birthday cards that arrive late. I know. I am sorry. Do not be sorry. Be happy. Sarah wiped her eyes. Mom would have wanted you to find something worth living for again. If this queen, this situation, this impossible cosmic accident gives you that, then you grab it with both hands and you do not let go. Tommy bounced in his seat. Does this mean I get to visit an alien planet? Can I meet the queen? Will there be spaceships? Jack felt something loosen in his chest, a knot he had carried so long he had forgotten it was there. I will make sure you can visit, both of you, as often as possible. We will hold you to that. Sarah's smile broke through her tears. Go be happy, Dad. You have earned it. The connection ended, leaving Jack alone with stars and silence, and a future that suddenly felt possible. Alindra found him there an hour later, her robes now bearing the symbols of reclaimed authority, her bearing carrying the weight of a throne truly occupied. You spoke with your family. Jack turned to face her. I did. They gave me their blessing, such as it is. My daughter told me to grab happiness and not let go. Wise advice. She moved closer, close enough to touch. And have you decided what happiness means for you? Jack had thought about this through sleepless hours, turning the question over like a stone in his palm. The resonance mark has been validated, by law, by tradition, by the acknowledgement of everyone who witnessed its power. I could stand beside you as consort, share your throne, rule the empire as your partner. But that is not what either of us truly needs. Jack took her hands, feeling warmth build between their palms. You do not need a consort to rule. You have proven that already. You need a partner who supports you without overshadowing you. Those are different things. Tell me what you propose. I am 68 years old. I have no training in politics, no deep understanding of your culture, no qualification to rule anything larger than a maintenance crew. Jack smiled gently. But I have spent my entire life building bridges, between wounded soldiers and survival, between broken systems and function, between people who thought they had nothing in common. You wish to build bridges between our peoples. I wish to be useful, to you, to your empire, to the future we might create together. Not as a ruler sitting on a throne I did not earn, as someone doing the work I was born to do. And what work is that? Helping people, teaching what I know, standing in the spaces where others will not stand? Jack squeezed her hands. Let me serve that purpose in the way I understand. Let me create something that outlasts both of us. What title would you claim? Does it need a title? Everything needs a title in an empire. Her smile carried gentle teasing. Jack thought about it, about the role he wanted to play, about the future he could see taking shape. Ambassador. Not the formal kind who attends ceremonies and signs documents. The working kind. The one who goes where others will not, does what others cannot, builds understanding from the ground up rather than the top down. A maintenance worker for relations between worlds. She laughed, the sound bright and genuine. I believe I can work with that arrangement. The wedding was simple by imperial standards, witnessed by those who mattered rather than those who merely held status. Miguel, Chen, and Bobby stood as Jack's attendants, 3 maintenance workers in borrowed finery, looking profoundly uncomfortable and unmistakably proud. Draken attended as a changed man, his experience in the shadow zone, having cracked open something that decades of privilege had sealed shut. His sister Lyanna stood beside him, her presence living proof that some bonds survived betrayal and emerged stronger. The young woman watched the ceremony with eyes that held gratitude and curiosity, knowing that the human who had spared her brother had also freed her from captivity. Draken offered Jack a formal acknowledgement of life debt, words spoken in ancient Valorian that would bind their houses across generations. What was owed could never be fully repaid, but it would be honored. Commander Thyra served as witness for the Queen, her scarred face softening with something that might have been hope for the future. Lord Chiron stood among the nobles who had risked everything on belief in the true royal line, vindication written in his bearing. Jack spoke vows that transcended species and circumstance, promising not eternal perfection, but daily commitment, not grand gestures, but steady presence. Alindra responded in kind, her words carrying the weight of one who had learned that true partnership meant shared burden rather than transferred load. Light flared between them as their hands joined, patterns tracing across their skin, witnessed by all present as confirmation of cosmic design. They were bound now by choice, as much as by the universe's mysterious selection. 6 months later, Jack stood in a classroom aboard a station that had become the first joint human-Valorian educational center. Before him sat students from both species, young faces turned toward him with the curiosity of those still learning to see beyond difference. He taught them what he knew: field medicine that worked across biological boundaries, engineering principles that transcended technological traditions, the art of looking at problems from angles others overlooked. The joint medical initiative he had proposed was now operational across 3 systems, training healers from both species in techniques that combined the best of human field experience with Valorian biotechnology. Doctors who had never met humans now worked alongside nurses from Earth's military hospitals. Knowledge flowed in both directions, saving lives that would otherwise have been lost to ignorance. But mostly Jack taught what could not be found in any manual. That compassion created strength rather than weakness. That different did not mean lesser. That the universe was vast enough to hold every story, every perspective, every way of being. Tommy attended classes now, Jack's grandson having traveled from Earth with his mother Sarah to spend the summer learning alongside Valorian children who had never met humans before. The boy absorbed everything with the boundless curiosity of childhood, making friends across species barriers without even recognizing them as barriers. Sarah had cried when she first saw Jack in his new role, tears of relief and pride. "You seem happy, Dad." The observation had carried the weight of years watching him drift. Really happy, for the first time since Mom died. Jack had considered the statement carefully. I spent a long time believing my story had ended, that everything meaningful had already happened, and all that remained was waiting for the final page. He had looked around the station at the work being done, at the future being built. I was wrong. Some stories have chapters we never expected. The important thing is recognizing them when they arrive. Now standing before his class, watching human and Valorian children learn together, Jack felt the truth of those words settle into his bones. Alindra appeared in the doorway, her presence causing students to straighten with instinctive respect. She wore the robes of her office, but her eyes carried warmth that cut through formality. Ambassador Mercer, her use of his title contained affection beneath the protocol. The council requests your perspective on the new cultural exchange proposals. Jack turned to his students with an expression of mock resignation. Duty calls. Remember what we discussed about approaching problems from unexpected angles. There will be practical exercises when I return. He walked beside her through corridors that had become familiar over months of service, their steps synchronized without conscious effort. The proposals are actually straightforward. Alindra matched his pace, her voice pitched for privacy. I simply wanted a moment with my husband. Missing me already, we have been apart for nearly 3 hours. An eternity. Her hand found his warmth spreading through their joined fingers. The council can wait a few more minutes. They reached an observation deck overlooking the station's central garden, a space where plants from both worlds grew in carefully balanced harmony. Jack had helped design the irrigation system, finding solutions that worked for species with vastly different needs. Tommy says he wants to become a bridge builder, like you. Alindra watched the garden below. He told his new friends that his grandfather fixes things between worlds. Kids say the strangest things. Children see truth that adults have learned to ignore. She leaned against him, her weight familiar and welcome. You have given them something valuable, Jack. All of them. A model of what connection between our peoples can become. I just do what needs doing, same as always. No. She turned to face him, her expression serious. You do what others believe cannot be done. You see possibilities where others see only obstacles. You build where others would only tear down. Jack thought about Mary, about her voice telling him to find purpose again. About Sarah and Tommy, about the family that now spanned light years. About Alindra and the cosmic accident that had brought them together. The universe picked me. I just try to live up to the choice. You exceed it. Every day. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching students from 2 worlds explore the garden, below their laughter rising like music through the transparent walls. Through the observation windows, Earth hung in the distance, a blue marble holding everyone Jack had loved in his first life. Valoria burned bright in another direction, the homeworld of the people he had come to understand and serve. Between them stretched the void that humanity was only beginning to explore. Jack Mercer, maintenance worker, combat medic, ambassador, had found his place among the stars. not through power or ambition, but through the simple commitment to help wherever help was needed. The work continued. The bridges grew stronger. The future unfolded one connection at a time. And somewhere in that building, that teaching, that daily commitment to showing up and doing the work, Jack had finally found what Mary had always believed waited for him. Not just happiness, though happiness came as welcome gift. Purpose that would outlast him. His grandson played below with children who had never seen Earth's sky. His students would carry knowledge to worlds he would never visit. The medical initiative would save lives for generations after he was gone. Some bridges once built stood forever. Jack watched the garden, watched the children, watched the stars wheeling slowly past the windows, and felt profound peace settle into bones that had carried too much weight for too many years. The universe, it seemed, had known exactly what it was doing when it chose an old maintenance worker for cosmic significance. And Jack Mercer, who had spent 15 years waiting for his story to end, had finally realized it was only beginning.